This is LukePaulson, the Catholic Conservative, and welcome to the news of the week for April 26th, 2025. And if you enjoy these videos, do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. The mortgage problem. For those of you who do not know the name Letitia James, let me refresh your memory. She is one of the many activist lawyers who targeted President Trump. This lawfare was not designed to execute justice. This persecutor...
Don't you mean prosecutor? No!
And those like her wanted to bankrupt President Trump so that he could not run again. She, like all of her ilk, failed miserably. For example, Fani Willis helped trump up charges about election interference. But when it went to court, it was revealed that she was an embezzler. This was projection at its finest. Back to Letitia James. She claimed that President Trump overvalued his property to commit tax fraud, even though the bank signed off on the value, but that is not important to her. Now, while I do not understand all of the details, the long and short is that she lied about the use of her property, and in doing so, she overvalued her property. Now, was she going to do this anyway, or was it just her projection?
Only Poppins would know.
Either way, I suspect that President Trump is having a good long laugh at her expense, and like me, has no sympathy for her. However, we now go on to news that is no laughing matter. There was another school shooting. FSU shooting. I do not like talking about these stories. As such, I'm going to try to get through them quickly. The technically alleged shooter at FSU killed 2 and injured 6. Now, this killer supposedly had crazy conspiracies, and this is why he did this. However, there are those who have crazy conspiracy theories and burn down cities before shooting up car dealerships. But the same media outlets do not blame their conspiracy theories. Now, he did have a huge fascination with Hitler and Nazi imagery, and these were red flags. But there are people to this day who defend Che Guevara and other communists who also killed their people indiscriminately. These are not to blame, according to the fake news. In the end, the shooter at FSU cannot be defended in any way. He should be condemned for what he did. I have no transition. Let us just move on to the next one. Track meet stabbing. Austin Metcalf was killed at a track meet down here in Texas. The short version is that the technically alleged killer was in Metcalf's tent. Again, I choose not to say the killer's name so that he does not get recognition. Metcalf was killed and died in his twin brother's arms. Their father has since officially forgiven the killer. To add insult to injury, the killer's family is now trying to make this a melanin issue, even though it is nothing of the sort. It was a deranged teen who killed an innocent teen. They even have a race hustler holding conferences, to which the slain child's father is not allowed to attend. These stories just break my heart. Let us go to the next story. Keeping criminals in America. President Trump has been forbidden by the Supreme Court to deport some of the illegals. Now, unlike Garcia, these people are still in America at the time of the order. While Garcia cannot be brought back, these illegals cannot be sent out. Leading the charge to keep the criminals in America was the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, or as I call it, the Anti-Christian Lawyers Union. Rather than just following the rule of law, which would require showing the paperwork from when the person went through the legal process to enter America, the ACLU is doing what lawyers do best: delay, delay, delay. Again, I am not a lawyer, but that is my personal experience with those in that profession. Now, from what I can tell, although President Trump disagrees with the decision, he is abiding by it. Unlike Brandon, who admitted that he was defying the Supreme Court over forgiving student loans. Or Andrew Jackson, also a Democrat who deported the Indians despite a Supreme Court order to the contrary. Courts and lawyers are shaping politics more than elected officials. Not that said elected officials even want to be there. The hackers vote. It does not matter how many passwords, how many networks it is routed through, or how many firewalls. Any computer network can be hacked. A new vote led by Congresswomen Anna Paulina Luna and Brittany Pedersen pushed for Congresswomen to vote remotely if they are pregnant or have recently had a child. While there is the technology to do this, it is unwise, and not just because it is unprofessional. As I mentioned at the start, any computer network can be hacked. That is a fact of life. Although most legislation does not make immediate changes to our lives, some does. It is those that cause immediate changes that I am concerned about. All it would take are the right hackers at the right time to shift policy to be beneficial to them. This is a reasonably plausible scenario that Congresswomen Luna and Pedersen did not foresee. Now, as I understand, the bill has been blocked, but it will come back, sooner rather than later. Speaking of voting, we will soon have a new pope. Pope Francis is dead. Pope Francis is dead, and there are no two ways about it. He ascended to the papacy at about the same time as Barack Obama became president. At the time, people were hungry for change from the status quo. Both men seemed to promise that hope and change. However, neither of them really delivered on that promise. Obama made the domestic situation even worse, even pouring gasoline on the last smoldering embers of racism. Pope Francis was not much better, being so inclusive and accepting that he endorsed and justified sin. Now both are out of power, one by term limits, the other by entry into the kingdom. I am not alone in thinking that he was an anti-pope. And as I mentioned a little while back, he may have stacked the deck against changes to his liberal positions. However, we may see the results very soon. While we are on the subject of the body of believers, I would like to further emphasize that we are living in a new renaissance. The Renaissance is here. My mom pointed out while we were waiting to see the King of Kings movie that there is a lot more Christian media lately. We seem to agree that it was a combination of people demanding it, a shift in the culture, and President Trump making it more acceptable. Now, while I still have a problem with The Chosen, I would much rather a person watch this.
You don't have to do that. What are you doing?
Then go to this event. Likewise, I would rather someone watch this retelling of Jesus
This is what my father wants. I'll accept it, and so should you.
than watch this scene from Blue's Clues. I would much rather a child watch this historically inaccurate portrayal
Someone who can help. This is Jesus.
Never heard of him.
than this scene from the once beloved Arthur. I would prefer kids watch this imperfect prayer scene.
I have faith, but sometimes the doubt creeps in. I promise I'll be good, and I won't do that thing again. Not sure where you stand on it, but I won't do it.
Than whatever abomination is going on with Harley Quinn. There is never going to be a perfect media adaptation of the good book. However, if it gets people into a church and to the altar and baptismal, it is worth it. While things are improving in America, we cannot forget how far we have come and how far we have left to go. The Temple of Death. Imagine you are a CBS reporter for a moment. I know, but work with me for a moment. You see a report about a pagan altar where children as young as 4 were sacrificed. You then call this, quote, not violent, close quotes, and emphasize how this shows insights into their culture. This Mayan temple is an abomination to all that is good. Granted, the same CBS reporter would not bat an eye when children are killed in so-called clinics under the guise of reproductive health care. When the conquistadors came to this part of the world, human sacrifices were one of the first things that they put an end to. If modern social justice warriors were around back then, they would see this and still call the conquistadors bullies. Any person who would try to justify this abhorrent murder should not be allowed near children. I would also like to point out that human sacrifice also occurred in the territory that became the United States. But tell me more about how everyone who was displaced by Europeans was peaceful. This was also between them perpetually warring over their neighbor's land. Now let me tell you how modern children may be at risk, at least according to a supposed CDC leaker. Is the MMR vaccine safe? In the early days of vaccines, a lot of misinformation was going around. One of the earliest claims was that there was a link between vaccines and autism. Now the evidence was very scant, and the scientist who was reporting this risk had a financial incentive because he had his own treatments that he was trying to market. However, now a former Center for Disease Control scientist has blown the whistle and claims that there is a connection that they covered up. I have only been around for a little over 30 years. In that time, I have seen countless scientists try to make a name for themselves, and the newspaper articles are published before the peer reviews. Naturally, the retractions do not get as much coverage. Now, the vaccine in question is the MMR vaccine that covers measles, the current 4-year virus. Now, is this actually legitimate, or is someone trying to make a name for himself? I do not know, but it would not surprise me if this was something that was covered up. Moving on from what may be the pop science of the week, let us talk about taxes. Fixing the IRS. The Internal Revenue Service, or IRS, is fundamentally broken beyond repair and needs to be dismantled. Gary Shapley, who helped take down Hunter Biden, was recently appointed to the Interstate Robbery Service. However, he is no longer in this position as a result of a lot of actions going on behind the scenes. Now, the way I see it, the more they have to shift around leadership, the less that could get done. However, that also means that President Trump will not get all of the reforms that he needs to make America great again. Truly an ethical conundrum. However, something that is pro-America is going through. Americans for America. President Trump has made a name for himself by putting America first rather than the rest of the world. Just as Germany should only have allegiance to Germans, and Japan should only have allegiance to the Japanese. There are several international organizations that he is cutting off funding to. The first is the United Nations, or UN, specifically the body on human rights, which gives money to Palestinian refugees. As I discussed last week, the UN's record on human rights is abysmal at best, to say nothing of their money laundering. I would not be surprised if Hamas is funneling the money to buy more missiles or to kidnap more Americans. The United States represents 22% of the UN's overall income. As such, this could put a big damper on their plans for world domination, especially with Klaus Schwab mysteriously stepping down from the World Economic Forum. President Trump is also cutting 90% of all U.S. aid contracts. Most of these probably amount to non-government organizations, or NGOs, that are either helping illegals enter America, against America's interests, or patently racist. To end all of this, foreign aid is a breath of fresh air. This represents a large portion of the federal budget. Without these, we may just have a chance of fiscal sustainability, and all of the countries that get our taxes should be cut off, whether it be Israel or Ukraine. Norway agrees with Trump. The Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr, met with President Trump. A lot of world leaders are seeing America with renewed strength and vigor. No longer are we a paper tiger that will just pay out the nose for all of these other countries. America represents strength. Prime Minister Gahr sees that this war between Russia and Ukraine is in no way beneficial to Europe, or to the rest of the world for that matter. As such, he complimented President Trump on his work in trying to reach a peace deal. President Trump was asked about Ukraine getting land back and admitted that it would be hard. They lost a lot of land, including Crimea, during the Obama administration. However, President Trump has already done things that were thought to be impossible. As such, I say, let him cook. Maybe I'm just blowing smoke. Maybe I'm completely off my rocker, but that is just my opinion. And do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. But before you go, on the left I have last week's video, but you may also enjoy the video on the right.